What's up, kids? Today we're talking about this tube amplifier here. This is a Little Dot MK3, and how I think it sounds, some of the quirks, some of the weird things that are a little odd about this particular unit. Hopefully not anybody else's unit. For example, the color. You see how it's black to gold? Well, the way that this looks to me is that the factory didn't paint this correct. I don't really have any other major complaints, especially regarding the sound. I think this is a wonderful sounding headphone amplifier. There are a couple of things that I wish it would include. There are some things at this price point that I think are better options, but for how much this cost, I can't really complain for what it does. It's a very powerful amp. It powers everything that I throw at it with ease. Even something like HD 600s, I was never ever going over the 50% mark on the volume. A couple things about the physical build. First, there is a 1/4 inch output in the front as well as a volume knob. And then on the back, there's a power switch, a power input, output RCA, and then an input RCA. That's kind of one of the quirks and things I wish they would add is something like a USB, at least Bluetooth. I mean, Bluetooth is not hard to add into things nowadays, guys. You don't even need Bluetooth 5.0. You just need Bluetooth in general. 4.0 would do just fine. So the input selection is extremely limiting. That's not a huge benefit in my opinion. I would have preferred something with at least 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 other options. USB, 3.5 millimeter, RCA, Bluetooth, and optical would, especially at this price point, be a welcome change. The unit doesn't isolate vibrations very well. If I have it on the desk and I'm playing games, I can actually hear the ringing if the music isn't too loud. Just so you guys know, if tubes vibrate too much, they can ring a little bit, and if they vibrate enough, they can actually break. So definitely be careful with that. And that unit is about 6 pounds, so it's pretty heavy, it's pretty big, as you guys could see. Other than that, how does it sound? Well, as I went over, it is powerful. It is a full tube amp. It's not like a hybrid like some of the other Little Dots, like the Little Dot 1 Plus, I think is a hybrid. That being said, and even though it is a tube amp, it doesn't sound like ridiculously tubey. It doesn't have this like thick and obtrusive tube noise that a lot of tubes, like something like the Dark Voice has, and options that are even tubier than that do exist. This is a noticeable change from a solid state and has definitely a pleasant and classic sound signature that you would expect from a tube, but it doesn't seem to go like way overboard. It's definitely something that would be considered more neutral within the tube territory. One thing that I think is worth noting is that on the dial that you turn the volume up, about 30% up, things from 0 to 30, everything has a very bright sound signature, and I'm not sure why. And then after you hit 30, it seems to smooth everything out and everything kind of comes into focus, not just the highs. Since it's such a powerful amp, what I ended up having to do was turn down my source to about 50% of what it normally does, and then turning up the tube amp so that I could get the volume and the pressure and the sound behind every aspect of the sound, not just the highs. I thought that was kind of a weird quirk. I'm not sure if it's just my particular unit or what, but something definitely worth noting. And then last of the quirks is that there's some pretty substantial feedback if you plug this into an outlet that has the other outlet filled. And I mean really substantial feedback, and it gets louder as the volume goes up. As soon as it's in an outlet though that doesn't have anything else plugged into it, there's no feedback whatsoever. That's something that I obviously wish wasn't there. It's a problem that I can deal with personally, but if you're pretty crunched on space and how many outlets you have, then this may not be something for you. And I also don't have another unit to tell you whether or not it's my singular unit or if it's a problem with the line in general. Now, on to how it sounds. Sounds pretty good, actually. Highs were definitely a little bit more present than on a solid state. The clarity in the mid bass, especially, was very good. The sub bass does come up a little bit, and it's not as deep and as hard hitting as a solid state is. And then the sound stage is widened maybe. It's a noticeable amount. I'd say 5-10% depending on the headphones. It's not groundbreaking or game-changing or anything like that, but definitely pleasant, definitely a nice change, definitely something that is noticeable even to amateurish ears. There's a noticeable and tangible difference between this amp and some of the solid states. And speaking of the solid states that I'm comparing it to a shit stack, which is a Magnet Modi. and a full of 2. I unfortunately don't have another solid state that's around the same price range. But speaking of around the same price range, I think for the money new, this is on the very upper end of what I would consider acceptable. And the only reason why I consider it acceptable is because it's so damn powerful. And that's only considering the fact that it is a tube and it's a full tube and not a hybrid. If you were to consider solid states as an option though, I think there's a lot better things that you can buy for how much this thing costs. And I say that while really, really liking this thing. This thing I have used and will continue to use and bought personally and own. But for somebody who's just looking for a decent headphone amp, especially a tube, I think the $300 range is kind of where things start getting good. Your comparable products are going to be like a Dark Voice, some of the Gen tubes that are available, and I know Monoprice, I don't think they have a fully dedicated tube amp that I'm aware of, but I think they have a pretty decent hybrid amp, although the Amazon reviews kind of tell me that some people don't really like them. Some of the improvements that I wish they would make on the next rendition of the little dot line is Bluetooth. I think for absolute sound quality, no, it doesn't sound the best. We already know that. But I think for convenience and for something that has so many limited inputs, if you don't even want to change the back interface, the Bluetooth could be all integrated within the amp. You wouldn't have to change any of the manufacturing or any of the outside manufacturing or anything like that. And I feel like that's just a convenient, easy, not very hard to do, pretty cheap to implement system that brings up the value of the product quite a bit. I would obviously like a little bit more diversity in the actual inputs and as well as the outputs. I wish this had a stereo output so I could hook it up to those K-bosses there. But another quirk that I actually forgot to mention earlier that I wish they would change is that if you have the out RCAs plugged in and you plug in a headphone, it plays out both ends. I kind of wish it didn't do that. I wish that if you had an RCA plugged in and you plugged headphones in, the headphone would take priority and be the only thing playing. And that way I could play it on my speakers, just plug in my headphones and then take it out and it would work just fine. That's not something that it does, unfortunately, but something that other amps do and do pretty well. And I think should have been included, but it wasn't. The funny thing is that I'm saying a lot of things that sound like I don't really like this thing, but I actually do. I like the way that this thing sounds. I think it's a pretty good value in a very, very powerful amplifier. There's just some kind of convenience things that I wish they would have improved on and wish they would have come out with. If you're looking for specifically and only what it does, I think it's a great option. I pretty much recommend it. But in general, if you're looking for more convenience related things, I think there are definitely better options out there. I think that's going to wrap it up for this review, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll, of course, answer them. Links to all the songs that I tested in my review are down below as well. And until next time, my name is Josh, and thank you very much for watching.